Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here. I'm having a Berkeley flashback because I grew up in Berkeley and attended this event and also many poetry flash events. So it's kind of cool to be full circle and on the other side of them these days. So I'm just appreciating that, as well as appreciating that we're all able to gather here under the umbrella of poetry when it could be otherwise. And remembering that it's always a privilege to do so, to have a place that is safe to gather and to be in public together and under the umbrella of the word. So appreciating that as well. And thank you to Joyce and Poetry Flash and everyone for hosting us. I like to start sometimes with a very small poem, like an amuse-bouche of a poem. And this is maybe that. I was asked to write an 8-line poem for the New York Public Library. They ask for people to write poems that people can carry away in their pockets, pocket poems. So I thought I'd write about a pocket. And it's called The Heart Is Not. The heart is not a pocket, a thing that can be turned inside out by anybody's hand. Not a place for pebbles or loose change. Not to carry old receipts. It does not tear at the seam. It doesn't have a seam. It cannot be torn. Oh, thank you. We're a clapping crowd. Or cloud, either way. We're getting the dog used to attending poetry events because that seems important. And clapping is one of the things she's getting used to, so helping her. I think so often we try to make sense of things that there's no way of making sense of. And this is maybe a little bit about that while sitting up late at night as I do, usually till 1 or 2 in the morning. I got to change my ways. But that is when I like to be up and writing, and this is called Nightbird. Hear me. Sometimes thunder is just thunder. The dog barking is only a dog. Leaves fall from the trees because the days are getting shorter, by which I mean not the days we have left, but the actual length of time, given the tilt of earth and distance from the sun. My nephew used to see a therapist who mentioned that at play he sunk a toy ship and tried to save the captain. Not, he said, that we want to read anything into that. Who can read the world? Its paragraphs of cloud and alphabets of dust. Just now, a night bird outside my window made a single plaintive cry that wafted up between the trees. Not, I'm sure, that it was meant for me. This sparkly folder is my next book, so it looks like I've made that transition to where you stop reading from the last book you had, and it feels like old news even if it's not, and start moving on to the next binder. So here we are. This is a poem about watching my mother cook. And does anyone eat okra anymore? Does anybody eat? People eat okra? Okay. I think so too, but I think that's because I grew up with it. But okay, I feel supported. I will read it then. Okra. My mother used to wash them in our old nicked colander, then drop them in a pan of bubbling cornmeal. I recall the quick work of her hands, the way she held the knife beneath her thumb, took the sticky pods and sliced them in the air. Butter, pepper, salt, and memory. Whose mother's gift was this? And in what forgotten country? To her, it was island food, cuckoo, the name for okra, made this way. And, if you were lucky, served with a sliver of flying fish. Taste of home to her. To me, flavor of somewhere I had only been. Impossible to count backward, trace. Our line broken by ships. Instead, the memory of hand and blade, the evidence that blood requires. If you cannot give me the past, give me, at least, the taste. Thank you. And I should say this manuscript is called Blade by Blade because I noticed how often, Whitman got in there with those blades of grass and then the blades of knives, and they just kept recurring, so blade by blade. I'm very proud that I actually noticed the time when I started reading because Joyce is so good at running a tight ship, and I don't want to mess that up. So I think I've got it covered. If I can just find my poems. 54. Oh, opened right to it. I wrote this poem when my friend Christopher was dying. And somehow, gosh, what happened? I had a dinner with Tony Hoagland, who was my first poetry teacher. Okay, this is a Berkeley story. I went to high school in Berkeley, college prep school, and Tony was dating the Spanish teacher, Betty. And so he agreed to teach a really small poetry class because I guess only about 5 of us wanted to sign up. And it lasted for a week. So we had this week with him, and then it turned into a whole summer because we said, hey, Tony, would you just keep teaching us? Like, we'll pay you and stuff. And so he lived in an apartment up near campus, and we'd go there once a week, maybe on, I think it was a Wednesday night, and have poetry class. And I don't think I ever completed a poem that I felt was a poem, but I struggled in an enjoyable way. I want to say that about it. And so this was from a dinner also with Tony talking about how almost everything tastes good. And he said, well, that's an interesting thought, Danusha. Like almost everything in the world, if you prepare it right, things from the ground, things on the land, from the sea, mostly taste good, unless they're poisonous. Edible. We want it all. Potatoes pulled up from under their poison foliage. The artichoke's heart scraped clean. The tender bodies of crustaceans broken from their calcified shells. Saffron stamens plucked from the crocus's center. Bark of cinnamon trees. Slow sugar tapped from the maple. The golden vomit of bees pried from its waxen vaults. Even for some, the delicate crunch of crickets or hind legs of lamb still tinged with blood. The world is such an unexpected feast. I think of my friend Christopher, who when he found himself dying early one spring, kept telling us how this was the best part, the letting go. As if in his hunger, he'd somehow broken into death's core, torn off the husk, the brittle shell, found inside the succulent heart, and savored it. I love taking my friend Vinty to poetry readings because he's kind of a jock, I guess you'd say. He's a surfer and a jock. And he responds to poems like it's a sporting event. He's like, whoa, yeah. Woohoo, score. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I love that. It's lively. I want to say that. So this next poem I wrote after going to an Earth Day festival where some very enthusiastic people who were running a booth handed me a used yogurt container filled with red wriggler worms. And they were so excited and so into talking about these worms. And I remember I took them thinking, okay, I'm going to do a worm compost. I'll do it. But I turned to my husband and said, but I'm never going to be like those excited worm people. So just note to self, let's not let that happen. And I think we all know what has happened. By the time you're writing poems about the worms, you are one of them. So this is Feeding the Worms. Ever since I found out that earthworms have taste buds all over the delicate pink strings of their bodies, I pause, dropping apple peels into the compost bin. Imagine the dark, writhing ecstasy, the sweetness of apples permeating their pores. I offer beets and parsley, avocado and melon, the feathery tops of carrots. I'd always thought theirs a menial life, eyeless and hidden, almost vulgar, though now it seems they bear a pleasure so sublime, so decadent, I want to contribute however I can, forgetting a moment my place on the menu. Okay, we have a couple more minutes, so I'll read one or two more poems depending on how the time goes. This next poem I wrote after reading the book Dwellings by the beautiful Linda Hogan. I don't know how many of you read her poetry and prose, but my God, what a book. And this was a chapter about talking to the corn. See if I can find this with my, oh, here it is. And that was, and the title of the poem is a line from that essay, and it's Nothing Wants to Suffer. After Linda Hogan. Nothing wants to suffer. Not the wind as it scrapes itself against the cliff, not the cliff being eaten slowly by the sea. The earth does not want to suffer the rough tread of those who do not notice it. The trees do not want to suffer the axe, nor see their sisters felled by root rot, mildew, rust. The coyote in its den, the puma stalking its prey, these two want ease and a tender animal in the mouth to take their hunger, an offering one hopes made quickly and without much suffering. The chair mourns an angry sitter, the lamp a scalded moth, a table the weight of years of argument. We know this, though we forget. Not the shark, nor the tiger, fanged as they are, nor the worm, content in its windowless world of soil and stone. Not the stone, resting in its riverbed, the riverbed gazing up at the stars, least of all the stars, ensconced in their canopy, looking down at all of us, their offspring, scattered so far beyond reach. And I think I will close with this one poem that's really a blessing, written with the intention of a blessing. Actually, it was a commissioned poem, which seems to me a very frightening prospect, but it was to go in the waiting room of a medical facility down in Monterey. And when they asked me to write something for a waiting room, I thought, God, we're all in a waiting room sometime or another. I want to talk about that. I want to talk to myself in that waiting room. What do I need? So let rain be rain. Let rain be rain. Let wind be wind. Let the small stone be the small stone. May the bird rest on its branch, the beetle in its burrow. May the pine tree lay down its needles, the rock rose its petals. It's early, or it's late. The answers to our questions lie hidden in acorn, oyster, the seagull's speckled egg. We've come this far already. Why not let breath be breath, salt be salt? How faithful the tide that has carried us, that carries us now out to sea and back. Thank you. And thank you, Richard, for the beautiful intro. Thank you. A belated thank you.
Thank you, Danusha.